Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve the history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the one you hear in a few minutes. I'm Chun.
I'm Red.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Miles. Today, Alex sits down with David A. Smith, computer scientist and inventor behind The Colony, one of the first 3D adventure games. They talk about the story behind his remarkable career, creating The Colony, working with James Cameron, launching Rainbow Six, and developing 3D technologies.
It's quite the resume he has. A lot of his work, I'm sure most people have seen to some extent, or at least his inspiration for his pioneering and what he did.
I actually didn't know about the work that he did on The Abyss with James Cameron. I love that movie, and the logistics of the technology that he made for that film really made a lot of sense. I was impressed that they actually thought of well, they'll get into it, but doing the thing that they did rather than just making the whole thing.
It was really awesome. Again, one of my favorite movies as a kid growing up too. I'm always enamored by that whole line of thought, and it's a great conversation, and he has done so much. Pioneering essentially first-person adventure games. So we'll let them get into the conversation. But before we do that, we have a bit of news. Arcane is out. Is it good? Is it actually good?
I think it's actually good. I was pleasantly surprised by the 3 episodes that I saw so far.
That's good to hear. I haven't seen it yet, but
it's worth a watch even if you don't know anything about League of Legends. It's well-made television. The animation is fantastic. The art design is great. You know, whatever your feelings on the game are, the story that they've made here is worth telling, and I think it's interesting enough to watch. So
awesome.
Good on them for making something fun.
Yeah. It's always going to be beneficial when you make a good story tied to an already great game. I'm excited to watch it. In other news, Skyrim is out again. The anniversary edition. So this is apparently the most definitive Skyrim release to date.
Until the next one.
And it's celebrating the 10th anniversary of Skyrim. It's actually launching on the November 11th, the same day that it was launched in 2011. So get ready to play Skyrim again with 1 to 2 extra missions. If you already have the Skyrim Special Edition from 2016, it is a free update for you.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes. So it's not going to be another extra one if you don't already have it. In other news, I believe, Chun, you can kind of let you know your frustrations on this. But Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker has been delayed for 2 weeks now.
Well, to lots of players, it is a frustration because a lot of my friends have been taking a day off just for the launch day of the new patch. But now we all have to change our plans. But after all, it's just 2 weeks. And we understand we have trust to the developers. That's what happened when there's a very good trust between the developers and the player communities. Is the players don't care too much about when you delay the game for maybe a week or 2. And the reason they're delaying it is simply because they haven't finished the QA. They just want to make sure there's no bugs and no glitch in the game by the time it's released, because it's the conclusion of the whole storyline for about 10 years. So,
wow.
Yeah, we can understand it, and we just keep waiting and looking forward to it. And if you're interested into Final Fantasy XIV, the complete edition of it, I think it's now 60% off. So it's just less than $30, and you can get it all the way to the Shadowbringers. And if you're interested in the game, it's a really good time to get into it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you sold me, but you might. I might pick it up. We'll see. If it's a 60% off,
I don't know. Just every single time I talk about it, it naturally sounds like an advertisement. Just
yeah. I mean, it's it always seems like a really fun game to check out.
Yeah, it is.
In our last little bit of news too, Elden Ring trial demos have started, and there's been mixed reviews so far. But again, it's just trial servers, and they're not really showcasing the full game. Apparently, it's a very spread out world, a lot larger in scale than other From Software titles. a lot more open-ended, and you could double jump on a horse. All right. That already kind of sold me for fast travel. Not even fast travel, just traversing.
Double jumping off of a horse or onto a horse?
No, while you're riding your mount, you can like double jump and jump up a very tall cliff.
Oh god,
where you don't need to.
that sounds pretty cool.
It does look really nice, and we'll see. We'll see how it comes out. I'm very excited for it. We'll see what it does. But again, with the climate of everything else, you can't really be too excited for any game that hasn't been released yet. Don't get your hopes up. Have a healthy skepticism. But I think it's about time we throw it over to some really exciting conversation with David A. Smith and Alex. And here it is. David A. Smith.
And here we are with David A. Smith. David, it's an honor.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
I have some deep questions, but I heard a story about you buying the first Mac out of some store somewhere in Boston and then building the Colony with it. I'm curious as to know which Mac that was.
That was that's a true story. What happened was I heard that Apple was going to have a new computer, and I went into one of the nearest computer store, because I used to have computer stores back then. And I said, I want the first one that comes in that you receive. I gave them like $1,000 up front, and then I didn't even know what the name of the computer was. And then when the Mac was finally announced, the store gave me a call and said, "Hey, your Mac is here." I did not know that every store only got one. It was for demo purposes. But they were true to their word. They said, "We told you we'd give you the first Mac that came in," and they certainly did. And
Wow.
so I had probably the first purchased Mac. I mean, obviously Boston had a lot of high tech companies that had Macintoshes, but I had the first one that was actually kind of for a mere human. And of course, the rest was I built. Actually, number of applications. That Mac was the very first one, though. It was just an incredible experience for me. It changed my life.
Was that was the 128K then, the original Macintosh?
Yep, it sure was.
Okay, so this legend has it that you wrote the Colony on that. Is that true?
90% of it.
That's insane. That is such a small machine and an early machine. What tools did you use? What were you using in?
Anything I could find, actually. Originally, the Macintosh didn't have anything. They expected to use Lisa's to develop. And so what I did was basically explored what I could do. But ultimately, we finally got a C compiler. I think it was a SoftWorks C for the Mac, which was, by the way, a terrible system. I hate to say it, but I was like literally doing their QA. There was no internet, so all this stuff is via snail mail, and so I'd send them these bug reports, and they get back to me all the issues, and 90% of the reports were from me. But it was I remember one bug that was particularly bad because I used letter C as I used the letters LR for left right, because part of the way the algorithm ran, it was sort of doing this searching through these quarter spaces. And what the SoftWorks C did is put a C in front of all the variables. So LR turned into CLR, which is a clear instruction in the 68K.
That's terrible. So it just dumped everything. Like every time you were doing left and right, it's like, boom, everything in that memory space is gone.
That was there was a lot of that. Well, it wasn't just their code that was buggy; it was mine. But so that was a challenge. Then there was a number of other apps, a number of other C compilers that showed up. Ultimately, ThinkC showed up, which was just Mike Call, KHL, created that, and that was really the platform that I was able to build. At some point, I finally got a publisher, which was Mindscape, and they got me a Mac 2 to finish it up with. Also, they wanted the color version, so I needed it anyway. But but 90% of the app was done by at the point on that machine. I did upgrade it in two ways. One is I upgraded to a 512K, the
Mhm.
Fat Mac, was that what they called it?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
also got, even more important, I got a 20 meg hard drive.
Oh yeah.
Remember, that 20 meg hard drive cost me $2,000.
Mhm.
20 megs. That's $1,000 a meg. Can you imagine?
Was it bigger? Was it bigger than the Mac, or it was like about like half the size of the Mac, right?
It was actually designed so that the Mac sat on top of it, and it was the same form factor. So it was very nice. It just basically lifted your Mac up about 3 inches.
Oh, that was an no wonder it was so expensive. It was a beautiful one as well.
It was Apple's design stuff. Yeah.
Uh,
But
so so
yeah.
the Colony got you to Hollywood, right?
Yeah, that's right. A pirated version found its way to Jim Cameron, the film director, and he was making the movie The Abyss at the time. And they were having a challenge on the set. They weren't. It was a massive set. If you ever see the movie, it's the underwater deep core, and so he asked me to work with Ron Cobb, who was an absolute legend, um, to lay out that set so he could actually walk around it and see what the camera would see. And they found that, like, for example, one entire part of the set was never going to show up on camera, so that saved him a couple $1 million. Uh, but yeah, that was a very fun experience, and also, it kind of launched the next phase, which was I created a product after that called Vertus Walkthrough, which is the first real-time 3D design tool for PCs, and actually became a standard in Hollywood for set design and directing.
Yeah, no, Vertus has a couple of pieces of software. I was going to ask about Vertus VR and about, I believe you wrote a book on Vermal along the way.
Yeah. So Vertus VR. One of the things we found that is a lot of people wanted to create 3D worlds, but they weren't particularly sophisticated. So Vertus VR took the engine from Vertus Walkthrough. Vertus Walkthrough was sort of like MacDraw for 3D.
Mhm.
And the idea there was everything was live. When you dropped an object into space, you instantly can walk around. We're very big fan of that liveness. And then so Vertus VR, and there was a number of apps that built off of that. Like one was Vertus 3D website builder, oddly enough. Was a drag and drop interface that allowed anybody to create really interesting spaces really, really quickly. And that actually led directly to when Mark Pesce and friends developed the VRML. Um, we It was just for us just another file format, so we just exported directly to that, and it was pretty fun. Yeah, remember that platform obviously never really took off. VRML was not ever um, never got to the escape velocity, but it was um, it was pretty fun. It was a pretty cool, very 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 early. The first Web 3D infrastructure. It had URLs. You could link to another page, link to another 3D world. By the way, that's not that dissimilar from what I'm doing now, but it's sort of a million times better today. But it was that was a killer project.
The thing that I find so interesting about Vermal is that it's not dead. There are still people out there tinkering with it.
Yeah, there's importers, exporters for it. It's not terrible. I mean, remember it originated with I think it was Michael Jones' Performer infrastructure, and they basically packaged it as a file format that could then become part of the Vermal. They did some modifications beyond that, but it was a very high at the time, a very high quality system.
I wanted to ask about Red Storm and the founding of Red Storm, of course.
Yeah. So what happened? Tom Clancy, the author, um, got a copy of my game. He saw there was a fanzine that did a review, and of course we got really great reviews. And he started playing it, and then he contacted my publisher and said, "Hey, I want to talk to this guy." And they asked, "Oh, you want to talk to Tom Clancy?" I was reading one of his books at the time, Clear and Present Danger. And I was like, shit, yeah. And so he gave me a call, and we started talking. And he was just one of the nicest guys. Also, he never asked for hints on the game. Game was very hard. No one had done a game like that. I didn't have any role models. So, it's this adventure game that's vast. It was taking some people a couple months to complete. And a part of it was part of the sadism. I just, I didn't know where to stop. But anyway, so he got totally immersed in it, and he called me every week, and not to ask for hints, but to yell at me. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you did that. It's like, and but he seemed to be having fun. Actually, there were a couple of scenes in there. There's a couple of things in there, like that. One of the children, you're supposed to rescue these children, writes a note to their mom, and it's in a desk drawer. You open the desk drawer, that note's there. And he said he was almost crying when he read that note, because it's a real kind of experience, especially if you never did it before. So he finishes the game, and he's like super excited. He's like, I want to be part of this. What are you doing next? And I told him about what I was doing at Virtus, and he became my first outside board member and investor. But we agreed that we were going to work on a game together. So what happened was Tom introduced me to the FBI hostage rescue team in Quantico. I actually went and visited them. They took me to their training, one of their training events, and it was astonishing. Basically, helicopters flying over. If you remember Apocalypse Now, it's like think of that, except live. And we were in an observation tower looking down on this battle town, and so the helicopter comes over one of the buildings. These black ninjas rappel down, and then they start blowing shit up. And it was like I've never seen anything like this. This is beyond any movie you've ever seen. So coming back, we called Tom and said, "We just saw the most amazing thing. We have to turn this into a game." And he said, "Well, first of all, I want if you do the game, I'm going to do the book. And second, I don't want FBI HRT. I want to do an international thing." So Rainbow Six was born. So Rainbow Six actually started out as a game.
And just a small note, I was actually a beta tester for the Macintosh port of that game.
Oh,
but I mean, what an influential game. It was, at a time when people were running down corridors and blowing up cacodemons on Doom without a second thought for how they actually go through the door. It's just go. Rainbow Six was such a thinking person's departure. Was that because of the history of the colony, or was that a specific choice that you were making?
Actually, that was Brian Upton. Brian was the designer of that. He started out as sort of head of engineering for Red Storm Entertainment. We started the game company together, but he realized pretty quickly that his passion is game design, and basically we had done a previous game called SSN with Tom that we actually brought in a sub-captain from the Royal Navy to help design that. And so it's very, very high quality realism in that, sort of getting into the brain of the captain. In this case, we were working directly with HRT as advisors, and we created a game that was based upon the way they work. Brian gets all the credit for how that game turned out, which was fantastic. Brian's, by the way, working with me now at Croquet, so he's still just one of the most brilliant designers I've ever had a pleasure to work with, and it's pretty. When you see what he's doing now, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah, I actually wanted to sort of segue into talking about Croquet with the first, you've straddled the line between game development and sort of quote unquote enterprise software early. Now, certainly enterprise sort of grade software, right?
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the, just on a personal level, what are some of the differences between the software development practices of those two industries historically? And are they being fixed?
Well, enterprise doesn't have a lot of 3D in it, and the requirements in the past have been pretty low. Games have been traditionally where the cutting edge is, and so that's one of the reasons I probably gravitated towards that. I should also mention, by the way, I got the opportunity to work with Alan Kay starting around 1990 when he saw early versions of Verse Walkthrough. And he and I did the first version of Croquet together starting in around 2000. We put a team together.
He must have liked that. He must have really enjoyed that feedback loop, that immediate feedback loop, right?
Well, that was, we actually built that version of Croquet in Smalltalk, and that feedback loop proved to be essential. Smalltalk's a system written in itself.
Mhm.
Every part of the system is malleable, so we actually had to kind of modify the Smalltalk language to do some of what we want to do, which is collaborative, interactive 3D. So if you look at some of the videos on YouTube that I made of that, you'll see it's very game-like, but it's very powerful. It's an environment that you're not just walking around, that you can actually create, construct, and modify the world as part of that shared experience. Everything was multi-user, everything's collaborative. And so the Croquet, there was a kind of a protocol that we developed. Alan brought in David Reed. David was the architect of the UDP protocol, if you're familiar with that. He was also one of the co-architects of TCP/IP. So we saw collaboration as the missing protocol of the internet. And so we designed, how do we do that? David's thesis was on replicated computation, so we knew that was the kernel, but doing the rest of it was the challenge. So Andreas Raub and I cracked that code, and so we actually had this, what we really call shared bit identical shared simulations. So once you can do that, then magic happens, because
absolutely.
Bandwidth goes to zero, but the complexity and power of the local system is infinite. And so that was Croquet. At that time, written Smalltalk. Later on, I did another version. I was a senior fellow at Lockheed Martin, and I built a version for the Defense Department. But then when I left that, Alan said, "Hey, we got to do the real thing," which is where Croquet Corporation came from. I inherited Alan's lab. They were part of Y Combinator Research. They were in a peer group to the OpenAI group, and we built probably the. Nothing touches it. We call it beyond the edge, because what's going on is we have these very light reflectors that are like on Google Cloud, Cloudflare, or that sort of thing, but they have absolutely no application state. A user joins, they connect to that, but then they get a snapshot of that replicated computation onto their system in a sort of a virtual machine. You play back all the messages you missed, and now you're perfectly synced with everybody. That includes simulations like physics, and for the first time, you can actually use physics as part of gameplay, for example. So it's as I said, it's sort of the missing protocol of the internet. Going back to Doug Engelbart's work when he did that demo in 1968.
I love Doug Engelbart.
Yep. The problem was that when Alan invented the personal computer, where Doug everybody's on the same time shared machine, so you could do that shared state. On personal computers, they had Ethernet, but they didn't know how to do that synchronization. And so basically, Alan and I said, let's fix that. Let's make it so personal computers can step up to the kinds of things that Doug was demonstrating, and that's what we did.
That's just incredible. I mean, talk about a difficult challenge in the computing science sphere to be able to build, first off, a dynamic platform where there's no state, but second, to have every one of those computationally things being distributed in a deterministic fashion, right? Like they're always going to run the same way. That must have. How many PhDs have been generated by your employees along the way here? Well,
they had a lot of them had PhDs before that, So. But yeah, most of the team right now has PhDs. They're language and operating system designers. All of them, except Brian Upton, actually worked with Alan in his lab developing a number of other projects. Of course, Brian wound up one of the chief game designers at Sony PlayStation for many years. But when he saw what we were doing, he signed up because he said he had an idea for a game that couldn't be done.
So I think that we've gotten just a tad too into the weeds. And before we end here, I wanted to give you a chance to explain what croquet is in English.
Yeah.
Instead of computer science.
Yeah. So croquet is, and as I like to say, the missing protocol of the internet. But basically what it does, when you're doing multi-user applications, typically sometimes you have to set up your own servers and that sort of stuff. What we've done is we created these things called reflectors that have absolutely no application state, and they're worldwide. And the goal is to have a 15 millisecond latency no matter where you are in the world. But what happens is the way croquet works is all of us we're running kind of this virtual machine on our systems that are running bit identical. So when you interact with the local view, that message, instead of going directly to the local, that virtual machine, it redirects via the reflector. The reflector puts a timestamp, redistributes it to all these virtual machines, and basically they update accordingly. It could be something like a live physics simulation running in there. Now, what's nice about that, the other thing I like to say is we make the hard part of making multi-user the easy part. I did this multi-user metaverse application that I'm going to launch shortly, and it's 300 lines of code, and it does everything. It's multi-user. I see you, you see me. You'll be able to take objects, drag and drop them, and spin them around, and there's virtually no code. From the developer's perspective, we take care of, like, when a new user joins, we take care of all of that, the synchronization, make sure he's up to speed. When he joins, there's an event and you can basically say, okay, I'm going to put you here, put you there, whatever. But the complexity of multi-user just collapses into almost nothing. The way to use croquet is you get your multi-user part up and running in the first 20 minutes, and then it's a publish subscribe between, and you just add new objects and it just works. So it changes the paradigm completely, and completely it gets rid of the hard parts of this, and it shouldn't be hard, really.
Gotcha.
I mean, what we want is people to let their imaginations go and not be stuck in the weeds of trying to get deal with race conditions or the other challenges that multi-user. That all goes away.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it sounds like it would be perfect for like a 10,000 user MMO kind of a in one room situation.
Oh yeah, I mean 10,000 is a lot for any system. Just looking at the physics, when you have 10,000 messages coming up, they have to go back down, so it's 10,000 squared. So you're not going to do it quite that way. But on the other hand, you can do 100 people no problem, which is kind of the one of the sense. But the other side is you can actually have 1 million people published, subscribing to that event stream and watching what's going on. So as long as the events aren't going up from them and down, you can have any number of people. In fact, one of the projects we're doing is imagine a stadium full of people, and all of them getting that live update of the replicated state, where you can see maybe like you're watching a digital game of some sort, or you're watching somebody sign a baseball card in real time, and it's just like they're up on the mound and they're just signing it. That actually works. We did the first prototype of that, and that's kind of wild. It's simple, but what's really nice is it scales.
Gotcha.
And I think it's a real key part of this is when we build systems, we're looking at super low latency. To me, when I think about augmented reality, for example, it's a conversation. You and I are talking just like we're talking now. But if we're face to face, for example, I'm going to say, hey, here's this virtual object. I'm going to open it up and then I'm going to share it with you. And right now we can do that via QR codes, which is kind of wild. But very shortly I'll be able to say here and hand out this live object to you. Now we both have it. Both of us can interact with it as if it's a live physical object, which is what's going to happen. When we
Absolutely.
think about this metaverse, um, it's really a communication platform that allows us to express ideas. Computer is part of that conversation, and share that interaction as easily as we talk about the weather. Uh, and that's our goal, is to provide the infrastructure for that engagement. And that's what's so exciting to me is, you're defined more by how you communicate than anything, and we're talking about taking the nature of communication and turning it into a very broadband interaction, and which is really means, if you're defined by how you communicate, and all of a sudden the scope of how you communicate is expanded, then you are redefining in a way what it means to be human.
That's amazing. I wish we had more time, David, but actually, I don't think we can go much further than that, harkening all the way back to to Douglas Engelbart there with augmented humanity. Thank you for being here, David. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, David. That was a fantastic, I don't know, your career just kind of blows me away still, just hearing about everything else that you've done and everything that you've worked on and been a part of. So thank you again for joining us. But with everybody else now, what has everybody else been playing? Let's get a little bit into some new exciting games.
New games like
Or anything that you've been playing new. I've been watching playthroughs of like Teardown, that new like Break Apart, fully destructible world game. It's kind of like a Minecraft-ish with small like pixelated blocks, but it's very much larger in scale and like detail and destructibility. It looks really, really cool. We'll see about that in the future, and I can maybe talk about that after playing it a little more.
Nice. I've been playing Borderlands 2 on the PlayStation Vita. I just picked that up.
PlayStation
Ooh.
Vita.
Yeah.
How is it on the Vita? Does it run really well?
It runs pretty well. There's some frame rate issues here and there, but nothing
that's like
too...
More than 10 years ago, is it? How many years is Vita's
10 years sounds about right.
Yeah.
about? Yeah. Oh, God.
But yeah, it runs pretty good. Yeah, it plays like Borderlands. Probably the most annoying thing, and this is mainly just a PS Vita issue, is the back control panel,
Mm-hmm.
which is touch sensitive. So those are sort of substitutes for clicking down on the joystick. So, like for example, if if run was assigned to like R3 or L3, that by default would be set to the back panel touch, and you can accidentally hit it while holding the device. So while you're trying to sprint away, you accidentally melee, and it's like, oh, I didn't meant to do that, and next thing you know, you're dead. So that's just one gripe I have with sort of the PS Vita. But other than that, yeah, it plays great. Fantastic mobile Borderlands.
That does sound pretty exciting. There's a lot more games that I've been like more interested to get on the Switch, because I've been playing a lot of it handheld more than anything. I appreciate handheld consoles a lot more. I miss them. It's nice to bring them around and travel. All right. Has anybody been playing anything else?
I recently started playing through old levels of Human Fall Flat with my friends.
That's always a fun time. And how much time is spent enjoying and laughing and actually having a good time.
Yeah, we're mostly focused on sabotaging each other.
Yeah, that's the main part of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the puzzles aren't rocket science. It's not a super difficult game. It's just like the controls make it weird to play,
Goofy and
fun.
floppy.
Yeah, and so it's just it's just something to do while we're hanging out. We're not taking it too seriously, which is I think its strongest suit.
Yes. Like anyone who takes I'm a pro human fall flat player, which I don't think anyone would dare call themselves, but there's games that are meant to just have fun and play. You don't need to take them extremely seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's very cool. I think it's just about time we wrap up this episode for today. We want to thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, please shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our patron supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services, and we'll continue that with future episodes every week.
This week's episode was brought to you in part by Patreon donors Dong Cheadle and J.A. Manger. Thank you so much for your support.
The Thanksgiving is getting close, so we'll be taking a break for next week. Don't worry about that. We'll be back really soon. Till then, I'm Chen.
I'm Red.
I'm Miles.
And I'm Anthony. Thanks.